Hello, hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olowska, multi-passionate creative, designer, and founder of My Dear Design Studio. And I'm so excited to be welcoming Susana Goss back to the show. So a little bit of context before we dive into this one, because I think it could really help ground the conversation, not just about Susana alone, but really what has unfolded between her and I in the last month, because this is actually not the first time that we got on the mics to air this episode. We actually recorded last month, checking in, talking about all things change that Susana has been navigating. It was actually the first time that her and I had connected in over a year. And Susana is someone who not only is a former client of mine, she was also my architecture professor when I was in school. Well, we were both in school. She was teaching, I was a student. So, 15 years ago now. But I consider her someone who really, in the last several years especially, has just become a dear friend. And so beyond that, though, us connecting for the first time last month in over a year about life updates, business, there was so much that unfolded. We had worked together, I think, over 3 or 4 years ago at this point to help her craft her initial business, Shed Collaborative, which was an intentional architecture and interior design studio. And so when we had connected last month to record, there was so much of this change that had unfolded for Susana and the realization that Shed Collaborative no longer aligns. And so we're pivoting. We have pivoted to Ja interiors. We're doing interior work and different philosophy. And like with anything, change and evolution, allowing the evolution really for whatever this business, myself, that has come about in the last couple of years to naturally have its place. And so that prompted the change with Ja. And then, as of the recording of this interview and this introduction, yesterday, Susana had texted me asking, hey, when is the podcast episode being released? I'd love to connect because there's been some more change. And so I texted her back immediately. I'm like, hey, I'm free now. Let's talk. Would love to hear what's going on. And that conversation turned out to be the most unexpected, but beautifully impactful, illuminating conversation on, yes, Sue updating me on what's been going on in her life and more changes that have transpired since our talk last month, but also just a moment where I needed to be reminded of so much of what Sue was saying and what I've been grappling with personally that's been happening in my life. As you guys know, listening and tuning into the season, all things transitions, me grappling with allowing evolution and questioning business and what I'm meant to do. And just all these life questions. And so when Sue had called me yesterday, it was a moment I was sitting in my car and I was just having that moment. You guys know when you're just like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Does any of this even matter? It was just kind of not feeling my greatest type of energy. And then I have this amazing conversation with Sue where we talked about her transitions, the journey of having come to decide to rebrand, and I'm using air quotes, rebrand Ja, only to now in the last several weeks discover it's not Ja, it's actually coming back to me. It's Susana Goss. It's Susana Goss Studio. It's who I am. And so we start this conversation with a dialogue on what it looks like to use a very appropriate word from Susana's own brand, to shed what doesn't feel right anymore. And whether that is rules or restrictions or ideas on business or whatever stories we might have attached to on how we should be doing things, whether that is running a business or showing up in the world or presenting ourselves on social media or whatever the heck that is. Looking at that stuff and recognizing how much of those things really ultimately get in the way of our natural inherent expression. And, Sue lets us in on her journey with that, all the beautiful lessons garnered, discoveries unearthed, all the while, both in this interview, but also on the phone conversation yesterday, to me, it just felt like, holy cow, the reminders I need, as I've also been diving into my own personal business life journey with Studio Domka, but also feeling like, wow, I've really let a lot of these, we could say, rules or ideas or constructs of how a business should be run dictate, yes, my business, but a lot of ways like who I am. Studio Domka, when it first started years ago, it was a creative outlet. It was a space that I so beautifully and innocently and purely organically birthed to house handmade cards in 2016, almost freaking 10 years ago. And then when I became a business owner, it became Studio Domka the business, now for brands and social media and graphic design. And along that journey over the course of, almost 4 years, it's been, to not my knowledge, I could say, subconsciously, because again, the stuff, like when change happens sometimes, like there's moments when the rug gets pulled out from under you, but then there's moments that like slowly evolve and like years go by, and then you kind of like take a moment and you look back and you're like, how did I get here? Like what happened? And so that's been something that really kind of came online and allowed me to, just like, I've been sitting with, I'll say, and walked away from this dialogue with Susana and the chat we had yesterday around what parts of me, my genuine, true, like inherent self parts, have I neglected or just dismissed because I felt like they don't have a place, or, that's not how you do business, or this isn't how marketing is done, or whatever kind of narratives we latch onto along the process. So liberating is honestly the word that I can use to best describe this conversation. A reminder, a permission slip that you could do it whatever way you want, so long as it feels good. Beautiful reminders of following joy, which, as you guys know, if you've listened in, that's been something I've been talking a bit about in my newsletters and some of the interviews, especially with my mentor, Ashley, around what it means to just like follow the joy in every moment, not doing something because you have to or you should, but because you want to. And, that whole conversation on following the joy creatively brought us into a deeper topic around what it means to follow joy in all aspects of your life. And what do you do in those moments where you're up against other people, whether it's your partner or your friends or your family? We touch on the topic of selfishness. And I use that in air quotes because there's so much of, stories that could be packed in to the idea of someone choosing to do something for themselves. And something that I so appreciate and have always admired about Susana is how fearlessly she stands in her truth. She wants to pursue something, she does it. She wants to, whatever it is, whatever she gets the call, she just goes for it. And I very much feel that I've had that peace within myself. I've been that person for many years. I feel like maybe as a child I was too, but maybe there weren't as many opportunities to have that space to like pursue what I wanted. And the reminder that Susana shares about connecting with your truth, connecting with what feels good to you, living life from that place, because at the end of the day, if you are in your integrity, then you are always going to be shining your light to and for others, because who wants to say yes when they really want to say no? And then that person gets like the shitty end of the stick because your energy isn't all there. And then you're only doing a disservice to yourself and that other individual. So it's like a whole plethora of all that stuff. I mean, this was a really pertinent topic for me in this dialogue because it's something that I actively am grappling with. The fear of disappointing others, people pleasing, whatever you want to call it. I grew up a chronic people pleaser. It's been years of work of like really overcoming that. And, something that I mentioned in this portion of the interview when we're talking about that is the practice. It's the practice of constantly just rehearsing in real time, letting it go, handing it over, zooming out, telling yourself like, this isn't who I am. Like, these are the thoughts in my head that are trying to run the show right now. How do I zoom out, come back to myself? So, you guys, I mean, I could keep going on and on and on about the richness of this dialogue. And I just think in trusting everything that's meant to happen. I feel so good about how this all played out. We recorded an episode last month that I was going to get ready to edit this week to launch for the following week, but very impromptu, realizing like that's not the episode that was meant to be aired. This is the one that's meant to go out. This is the one that feels more pertinent and I don't know, maybe just relevant in this moment. Not to say that that other one wouldn't have been, but clearly there was more that needed to be expressed in this dialogue. So I'm just really grateful that we pressed record again. Susana was open to having this conversation again. And all of the thoughts shared amidst us both for myself were, again, reminders. And I'm really looking forward to them landing however they might for you guys listening. And however they do, let me know. Reach out, send me an email or DM me on Instagram. Always love to hear your guys' thoughts. But I'll pause here and I'll let you guys get into this amazing dialogue with Susana Goss. I love me a good unexpected chat. All right, well, welcome, Sue. Hello again. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so maybe I can start off with some quick context for the listeners. This is actually not the first time Sue and I are meeting to record this dialogue. We had connected, last month, I believe, right? Last month to record the podcast episode, which I have scheduled to go live next week or in a week and a half. And so, but you had texted me yesterday, uh, looking to connect just to talk through or chat rather, ask me when the podcast episode was going live, as there's been changes since we last recorded. So I'm like, let's connect. Let's just, see what's going on. And after the beautiful conversation we had yesterday, at the end of it, I realized I'm like, we need to re-record because there's more stuff. There's more stuff that's changed, that's evolved, but I don't know. I feel like the conversation that we had yesterday, we were just diving into so many good things that for myself hit home, but I feel like for people probably tuning in and listening, this could also resonate so deeply. So
Yeah.
that's where that's where we're at today. So maybe Sue, we can start off. I think maybe a good starting place for us is just to share a little bit more context of where we were last month. Like what called us to connect? What were the circumstances of last month? And what's brought us here?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I think it's very appropriate that your podcast this season is about change. And here we are, embodiment of that.
Yes.
So when we connected last time, I had gone through the process of in business, changing the name, Shed Collaborative had become Jean Interiors, and there was this sense of something needed to change, and uncovering what that was led me to Ja Interiors, which is where we were when we talked, and we were talking about that change. And since then, which has only been a month, the new realization that actually that was not what needed to change. That it was actually more about a returning to a core. So that it's a different kind of change, but we have talked a lot about brand and what a brand is. You came along right from the start. A conversation that you and I had, and I still remember sitting in my car talking to you, and we hadn't spoken in years, and we connected, and you said you were kind of moving into branding, and sparked my desire to really take on business and work for myself. So you were right at the germ of that part of my journey. So it is very fitting that we've come full circle back to that, because I do feel like it's a returning back. So what has happened in the last month is the realization that it's not about Shed or Ja or this naming of something. I think what is really at the heart of what I do is who I am. And that is irrelevant of what it's called, right? It's sort of, we try to package things in
Oh
a
yeah.
way that's understandable for people. And what we talked about yesterday is none of that actually matters, because if you know me, it's irrelevant, right? I am who I am, and you've known me for how many years? 15,
Yeah. A long time.
right? And
Yeah.
there's a thread, and I've known you for just as long. And what the core of what I know of you has not changed. Like, you're still that person. So change is something that is so hard to describe, because in a way it's all just, it's all just kind of stuff. The
Yeah.
core of us is there, and it's how we respond to that stuff that doesn't actually change that much, right?
Yeah. No, that conversation that we had on the phone yesterday, really left me so stirred in just zooming out, I think, and pulling myself out of the nuances and some of the weeds and details that I've been looking at so much. And you spoke to that, alluded it a little bit in what you just shared around, we get so caught up in like presenting ourselves to the
Mhm.
world, of how
Yes.
people are going to perceive us, and also something I shared, and I had a beautiful dialogue with my mentor last week about it, around this idea of the expectation setting, of like, where are we putting work out to, garner either a client or money or likes or validation or whatever that is. And in that process of putting these, more often than not, unconscious restrictions, we are taking away from the true, authentic core essence of our work. But I think also in what you shared is who we are. And there's so many thoughts I have, and gosh, there's so many questions I can ask you just to dive deeper on this. But like, something that we spoke about too that I've been questioning is like, how valid is the process of like branding and going so deep to like position and message and formulate this structure. And branding aside, I think this could go for any business. There's so much of these rules, we could say, or constraints that we could put on of how to grow a business and how to do that. But more and more in my conversations with people, things that I talk about in my, little mentorship group, the conversation with you yesterday, is the more that I think we do that, is the more that we remove ourselves from our essence, like who we're meant to be. So maybe a question that I can ask you is related to the coming back to yourself, to Susana Goss or Sue Pereira or Susie, or like all these names or labels that we might go to.
Yeah.
What are some, I guess, what are some of those realizations that you've had about yourself? Maybe where you've moved away from yourself, and also on the flip side, where you've come back to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the at this moment, what became clear to me is that when I entered architecture school as a 18-year-old, you know, I put myself unknowingly on a journey of self-discovery, because that is what design can be. It is it's hard to describe to people what architecture school is like. You've been through it. I've been through it, and I went through it at a time before any digital anything. It was, everything was very visceral. The connection from the brain to the hand, all of this. So when I started that journey, it was an awakening of, oh, I actually have found the way for a lifetime to explore who I am as a person.
Mm.
And that is what I've been doing. And that journey started, and then I learned how to do that, how design does that for me. And that's essentially the path I've been on. It's like, what do I care about? It's just a never ending path of curiosity. You're curious about something, you follow it, you digest it, you mull it over, you make something, it leads to making something else. You meet a person, you bring them into that fold, you help them understand that they're on a path of self discovery, and you present design as another tool for them to perhaps engage in their own being and who they are and what they care about. And I've been doing this, and that realization is like, it has nothing to do with a brand or a product that I create or a home that I make for somebody. It is when people come in contact with me, that's what I bring. We talked about seeds, right? It's like planting a seed, and then watching it grow, right? And helping and being like, yes, keep growing that seed. And I'm over here growing my seed. And so the brand of like trying to be like, oh, I do interiors, or I do architecture, or I do this, or I do that. Like, yes, I do all of those things, but it's not really the point. And it is not really why people want to work with me. They want to work with me because I help them plant a seed in themselves, whether it's through an interiors project or an architecture project or a branding project or whatever it is, or an art project, or just being a friendship, right? Or parenting. I try to plant a seed in them that helps them see, oh, wow, like I have all of this. I'm going to go explore this. And suddenly off you go, So, we I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the best way that I can describe it. All of the constructs that I've been creating felt like something I kind of had to do, because that's how the world wants to understand me, is through a brand or a business. But in reality, that's not how people know me at all. Like, it doesn't actually, when I changed from shed to shop, people were like, okay, great. It's still Susana. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, I didn't worry that much about it because I kind of knew that. And I'm not worried now when it's like, oh, it's not really Ja. It's actually just Susana Goss. Like, it's just me. And if you want to work with me, awesome. I'll work with you on whatever you want to work on. And let's do it, right? Because that's the joy. That's what brings me joy. That's what I love to do. That's what I actually want.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we had that initial conversation, so this was, I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe at this exact moment, because I had started Studio Domka, like I left my full-time agency job, started freelancing full-time, and those first months were such a rich unknowing, because I had no idea where my next client was coming from, no idea where, like what I was even going to do, like how I was going to make money, but I think because I stayed open and because I stayed curious, things just always came my way. And one of the little downloads or taps of inspiration that I got was to contact you, because from our experience in school, you always stood out to me for embracing more than just being a teacher. It's like you had your sewing business or fashion little thing that you were doing. You had your blog. I remember visiting your home and I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like, this is Susana's home and she does the home design. And there was just always so much of you. And so one of the things, my biggest concern at the time when I had called you was, how do I like fit all the stuff of me? Like, I have this brand, Studio Domka, that was born years prior. It started as me making cards, but then it evolved. I was going through that at that point in my life 4 years ago. It was a big season of change because now I was transitioning into a business owner for the first time of my life. And I was taking on clients, and there were all these things that I was learning because I wanted to be a good business owner, and I wanted to, figure out taxes and all the things that just come with the journey. But all the while, what I didn't realize that I was even grappling with was this pressure of feeling like I need to be one thing. And in that call, you, without me, I didn't even know, like this wasn't even like a conscious thought. You just said, she's like, get rid of the labels, like get rid of all the things that make you feel like you need to just be one thing. And that was the most liberating piece of advice, I think, to this day that I've gotten as it relates to how I see myself, how my creativity comes into play in my life, because I do so much. And I think for everyone, really, I want to say anyone, but it's really everyone listening because we all do so much. And it just gets so hard when we have these very organized, pretty boxes of a work or a job rather, or I don't know, a project or something that just starts to like conform you a little bit. And as I'm saying this, I'm really reflecting and seeing, wow, you know, in the last 4 years, I shared this with you on our call yesterday. Like, I feel like, especially the last year, I've been really trying to niche myself into this like personal branding coach, consultant, designer. Like, this is who I am. But then I'm like, where's the artist Evelina? Where did she go? Where is the, you know, the podcast is happening, that's live, but it's like, where is the resting place for all of it? So that has been something that has been really top of mind for me. I mean, in the last 24 hours, but I think subconsciously the last couple of years, as I feel like I've felt the pressures of wanting to conform into this entrepreneur, into this business owner. And on the journey, I'm like, oh, the other parts of me have kind of just like slipped away a little. Yeah.
And you miss them, right?
I do. Yeah. I do. And so I imagine like, I don't know if that is maybe congruent to what you've been feeling too. You know, in this chapter of your life and with your business, I know we talked a little bit yesterday around kind of the back and forth around, is it architecture? Is it interiors? It's like, what is it that you're doing in the realm of your career? But I think this easily transcends just business. It's life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's so interesting to hear you talk, because I still remember you as a 20-year-old, or however old you were when I first met you, in 19 probably.
Yeah.
And you know, the experience of teaching, I did that for 15 years, which is not a short amount of time. And the amount of students that were at that stage that came through my classes, there, if you can count the volume, there were many, right? And it was so interesting because at the start of every class, you know, I would sit everybody down. I don't know if you remember this. We always had a little circle, and
I do.
I would have you share a little bit about yourself right away, right? Right away, you would have to kind of utter some words about you, why you're here, whatever it was. And I did that because I wanted everyone to understand that this is the reason why you're here, right? It's you in this circle of people, but we're all in a circle together, and I'm here in this circle with you, right? And I remember there are certain students that always stood out immediately, even in that circle. And those were the people that already had the seed of this in them. And again, you know, childhood is an interesting thing because all children have this. This multifaceted, doing all the things, seeing the world from multiple perspectives. You know, it's not science and math and art and music. It's not like that. It's understanding the world through whatever means necessary to get there, to get to the next thing, to understand the next thing. And I remember you know, very clearly being one of those sparks right away. I'm like, oh, she has the spark. and he has the spark. And she has the spark. And it's like watching that spark mature over all this time. And if you're still the same Evelina that I knew, Minnow, remember? You used to go by
Oh,
Minnow?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we forget all of that stuff. We forget that. We forget our 18-year-old selves. We forget our 7-year-old selves. We forget that it is not about presenting something to the world. It's about living a life that is joyful and meaningful. Mm-hmm. That's the trick. And we forget about all of that, and we go into like mode of whatever. And suddenly the things that actually bring us joy fall off. And it becomes a presentation, especially in today's world. You know, we talked about like Frank Lloyd Wright didn't present himself to the world in a certain way. He was just himself. Do you know what I mean? Like Carlos Scarpa did not have a branding coach. He was just Carlos Scarpa things that he loved to do, that made him feel alive and that were his passions. And it's like we forget that's we don't do that anymore. It's like everything becomes a presentation to the world, and it's like, does that really matter that much? No, because in real life we're just interacting with each other. We're meeting. We're falling in love. We're meeting somebody in a grocery store and sparking a conversation, being like, oh, what is this? Who are you? And we may never see them again, right? But all of that stuff is where I want to live all the time. And yes, of course, I have I present myself to the world in a certain way. And we've talked about authenticity, and what the hell does that mean? It's like, oh, I'm branding authenticity. Well, that's already not authentic, right? You're already like
Yeah.
not authentically you. It's like, so authenticity is just being. And then like, oh, if you happen to be like, oh, I'm going to pick up my camera and share this with somebody because I feel compelled to, it is so complicated, but our world has become overly complicated, and I don't
Yeah.
think, I really don't think it is. It's
Yeah.
so this season of change is just a return to that, to simplicity, to doing the things I love, honestly.
I mean, the way you just shared it, yeah, the way you just shared that, it really can be the reminder that it really can be that simple.
It is that simple.
It
It
really can
literally
be that
is that
easy.
simple. Yeah. I think the beauty actually, and I want to say this because I think the beauty of what you do in branding, let's just call it that. I think we've talked about renaming it because it's not actually that. The beauty of what you do is in the conversations that you force people into. Not force, but you encourage people to have, not just with you but with themselves. And I think we're very similar in that way, which is the result that comes out of those conversations is the branding, but it's the conversation itself that is the value, because it gets that person thinking about why they're doing this.
Mm,
And yes, there's a logo and there's a thing that happens, but that conversation touches people and it changes them, and that's the value in what you do. So don't stop doing that, because the branding, again, whatever comes out of it is a thing, but those conversations are invaluable. Invaluable. And I've been in that chat room with you having those conversations. And they've been magical, because it helped me understand something about myself that I didn't understand before.
mm.
Isn't that the beauty of human relationships?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Sue, for sharing that. I appreciate your words, and hearing you speak them helped me to also look past some of those structures or like walls, we could say, that I've put up of how I should talk about it too. Because to your point, and you said this to me, I don't know, over 2 years ago, maybe, when we finished our work with Shed, of it's not branding. And you actually planted the seed of like expression. Like, I love that word, brand expression, because something that I recognize that I do and maybe comes quite naturally to me because I don't even think about it. I have a conversation with someone and a question just comes to me and it invites them to look deeper into who they are. So it is a process of deep self-discovery, which transcends, to your point, like anything visual, anything like that. I think where I can see I've gotten so caught up in it is like, well, how are people going to understand what this is? It's like you kind of just got to talk about, like, you got to use this verbiage and looking up SEO and hashtags and what people are searching for. And then as you're speaking, I realize I'm like, you can't talk about it. Like, there's no way to talk about it. And I think this kind of brings me back, and this could maybe be something for, I mean, anyone really listening, of how much we get so caught up in the process of wanting to put out our work and then removing ourselves from the trust that it's just going to evolve as it's meant to. Because I could see, in the journey of, researching SEO and hashtags and spending so much time on ChatGPT and positioning of like, how do I talk about what I do? Like, that doesn't matter. And the people that are meant to find me are going to find me. And this completely flies in the face of any marketing wisdom or knowledge or anything like that. But I think that's okay. And I think this is too where we can come back to the purity and the essence a little bit more of what we are doing and what we're meant to do, and removing ourselves from these shoulds and have tos and just like rules of society essentially. I mean, I've never really marketed my business outside of, some posting on social, and really it was in the last couple of years that I kind of ramped it up as clients kind of started declining a little, and I started getting a little nervous of like maintaining and upkeeping my business. But I never once put out anything in the first 2 years. Like, people just came because I was so, those were the really pure days where I didn't even know anything about business, but I was just doing it because I loved it. I was just following that spark. And I could see when I look back, I'm like, oh, well, it started slowing down because I felt like I needed to be like this person, or mirror exactly what my coach was doing, or follow this protocol. And it's like, wow, that wasn't it. But to something I shared too, I'd love your opinion on this, because I feel like you said this at the beginning, around like you started at one place, you went on this journey, and now you're kind of coming back to that place. I too feel like that's a very familiar metaphor, we could say, for my life. I asked you yesterday, like, have you ever read The Alchemist? Because it feels like, it's the journey of the shepherd boy going and exploring all these wonders of the world and being on this crazy journey, only to come back to where he started, to realize like everything that I was seeking was right here. It was at home with myself. And so I could see where I have gone on this journey to learn so much, only to now be feeling like, yeah, I think I'm coming back to that essence that I might have, we could say, got distracted from. So yeah, would just love your thoughts on that. And maybe, I don't know, what's coming to me is like, maybe what lessons you learned in that journey of maybe deviating from Susana Goss, if we can call it, only to come back to her now.
Yeah. I mean, she's always been there, and
Right.
I think where I got lost and what I've learned is that um, we do we do feel pressured, all of us, to be a certain thing in a certain way, because that's the right way. You must be organized in order to be a business owner. You must, all of these things, and you get lost in that, and you feel like, oh, I'm doing something the wrong way, right? The wrong way. And so we go down these paths because everything around you is telling you to do that, right? And all of that stuff is, I mean, we could talk about societal constraints and where all that comes from, and the need to control, and especially for women, what our place in society is and what it should be and what it should not be. And that's maybe a different podcast, but all of that is there. It's all there. You should be like this, and if you become a businesswoman, then you should definitely be like this and like this and like this. Otherwise, you're failing. And so that's all over here. And you go down that road, and I went down that road. I'm like, I'm going to have a business, and it's going to have employees, and it's going to have this, and it's going to have that. And I found that I was spending all of my time doing that, and doing nothing that actually brings me joy, or that is on that path that I'm on, which is of curiosity and self-discovery, and none of that. I was doing none of those things. And so, wait, pause. Like, my heart was not in it. I'm like, this is not giving me any kind of joy anymore. And I love what I do. Like, I legitimately love everything that I do. All design work, anything that involves home, all of that stuff is like, I live, eat, breathe that stuff. But it was not there anymore. It was gone. And I had to say, why is this gone? So, it's, I don't know. I kind of go down the line, and then I forget what the question is, but
Well, I love where you're going, so keep going, Sue.
so yes. So the heart, right? You look back at your heart and you're like, okay, what am I doing right now? I have no idea. I've lost my way. I'm spending all my time again branding, trying to put things into the world, and I think I'm one of the lucky ones where it's still there's still like I can't not do it the way I want to do it. You know, I still am very connected to the thing, and I'm just like authentic. Again, that word is kind of strange, but um, yeah. But the joy when you feel the joy is gone, you need to stop and step out. And then making change is also really hard for people because it's scary. And for me, it's actually the only place I always want to live. I want to live in scary all the time because it's in scary that growth happens. It's not in safe. It's not in doing the expected. It's not in, oh, everyone understands who I am and what I'm doing. Great, win, check. Like that is like why, right? I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in that place of unknown. Like, what am I doing? What's happening? I don't know, right? Like, let's go explore it. Let's change. Let's move. Let's create. Let's make mess. Like, the mess is always where I want to be. And that's where I find so much joy. But it's in the mess of creativity, of curiosity, of like exploration. It's not in the mess of the rules and fitting to them because that's a different kind of mess, right? That is like, I don't even understand what this is, and I'm trying to conform myself and contort myself to this. Um, but anyway, we probably got on off on a tangent.
No, it was
I think,
great. It was so good.
you know, and I think that the what has come out of it is that, you know, I was trying again very hard to create this business around rules of business, which is I have employees and I have partnerships and I have all of these constructs. And what those constructs did for me is they kind of snuffed out my light, my my freedom, my sense of freedom of self. And then what you end up doing is you're sort of you've created a lot of people and things that you have to take care of.
Mhm.
And I know this about myself. I am not, and you know, this is another thing that's very hard for us to admit things that society says that we shouldn't be. I am not a nurturer in that way. I am not someone who is a mother figure. I am not a come here, I'll take care of you person. I am not that person. And my children know this about me. You know, and it doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything because to me, the truth of that actually frees me to give what I am good at giving and what does bring me joy instead of trying to be the nurturing mother and the nurturing boss and this and this and this. And all of that is just, I can't do that stuff well because it doesn't come easily to me. So instead of doing that, why don't I do what actually comes easily to me, which is inspire people to be themselves and to explore for themselves what they want for their lives, right?
Mm.
And to sort of help them in that way instead of like relying on me to carry them along. I can't do it. You know, I
Yeah.
don't know how to do it. But that's what you're told as a woman and as a business owner, that you have to be the person that carries all of the things, right? You create this entire world and then it's all on your shoulders. And for me, the carrying of that on my shoulders just erased my joy and my spark. And suddenly I'm not good for anybody else either, right? It's like I become this person that people don't actually want to be around anymore because I'm not actually authentically myself. So it is saying, you know what, I'm not going to do those things. Why am I doing those things? I've never done that before. Pause, erase, you know, go off here. You fly. I'm still right here. I'm still right here, right? I'm right here. Our friendship does not change. Our relationship does not change. It's actually going to grow now because it is more in line with why you wanted to be in my orbit in the first place, or why I wanted to be in your orbit in the first place, right? It's like, oh, now we're all free.
Mm. Well, this is landing for me so much, Sue, because I really feel there's many overlaps between us from our
Many.
life journeys, our
Yes.
heritage, cultural upbringings,
Oh
European
my God. I
backgrounds.
love that you're bringing heritage up because it all stems from that. You
Yeah.
know it.
Well, that's where
Well,
I'm going. That's
tell me.
exactly where I'm going. My question that I wanted to ask you is, well, I guess two questions. When did you make this realization in your life? And what pressures did you face along the way? Because for me, the first thing that comes into my mind when because I personally grapple with this all the time, and I have personally had people in my life call me out, specifically calling me selfish. And that word, I don't know, that word still, there's something sitting there for me of like, anytime that like I'm grappling with, should I do this? I just had it a couple weeks ago. My boyfriend and I play volleyball. Who would have thought? I'm not a sports girl, or team sports at least. And so it's been months, Sue. I've been part of this volleyball league. It's been great. But the season was transitioning from indoor to outdoor, and I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But like, I didn't even question an alternative because I'm like, well, he wants to do this together. It's a good bonding opportunity, all that. And what a gift that my resistance to playing volleyball this season was, because it prompted a very deep introspective conversation between the two of us where I recognized for myself, I was so hesitant to tell him that I don't want to play because I felt like I was letting him down and that I was being selfish. And he didn't tell me directly, but there was one point because we were having a conversation right here on the couch. Then he went to shower because he was very upset. And he like said afterwards, he's like, I didn't say this to you, but he's like, I was so angry in the shower. And all I kept thinking about was like, you're so selfish. Like, you're so selfish for like, we committed to this and now you're backing out last minute. And it really, like, now I look back and like, this was such, again, a gift, because what that revealed was, one, where I'm still holding on to pressure to want to do stuff for other people that doesn't feel good to me. And two, where he was holding on to expectations. And he ended up just so beautifully afterwards coming to me and be like, I'm sorry for like for me being selfish and wanting to have you all the time. I'm like, whoa, like this was so magical. So glad that happened, even though it was so uncomfortable. But yeah, I share that because I realize that is so prevalent still in my life, that grappling with me doing things for myself or where something doesn't feel good, like very firmly just being like, no, I don't want to do this. This doesn't feel good to me. Or yes, I want to do this when maybe no one else is, or whatever it is. So yeah, back to, I guess, two questions is, what has your relationship with that been like? And when did you kind of come to realize this in your life? And feel free to throw heritage in there because I think our European roots could be involved.
Yes, I love talking about this, and it has been something that has come up recently in my life. This idea of selfishness and what that means. And so, when did I realize this about myself? I think I've always been this way, which is like, really, yes, really. And I say this because um, I don't know why, but maybe it's being the youngest child. Maybe it's also, my roots are very interesting. As you know, being Portuguese, kind of being a part of this long, this country that's been around forever with deep roots. And I mean, I'm Portuguese, like born in Portugal. Like my lineage goes back generations and generations and generations of Portuguese people from the same town. And, my parents knew each other, all of this stuff. So all of that rootedness, is there, but I don't know why. I think for me it was, my father's side of the family is sort of, they're considered a little bit on the fringe of,
Mm.
of convention. Again, storytelling is really prevalent, and family stories are always there. And every story I hear about my father's side of the family is that the grandfather went off to America and was like exploring, blah, blah, blah. The grandmother was this like larger than life woman who like cooked for all the poor people, gathered them all around her, brought them into her house. She was like the woman of the town that everyone knew, right? And then my father has this like creative spirit and was a sea captain. And my uncle was a musician. And like my grandfather, they always talked about like he came from pirates. I was like, what does that even mean? I'm like,
Oh my God.
I was like, pirates? What are you talking about, pirates? I don't know what that means. So there's this like underbelly of these unique people. And then I pop out, and my father's side of the family, we have like these light eyes, and we kind of, that's very unusual for Portuguese people. And there's this whole folklore around them. And when I popped out, I immediately felt like part of that lineage. And my mother's lineage is the opposite of that. They're like rooted, families, everything. The Rhodas are forever. They're like amazing and all of the things and da 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 da. And my father's side is like, woo, like
I love this contrast.
yeah, I had both of those. If you when you meet my parents, you will understand that's exactly who they are as people too. And here I am and my brother, and we kind of sit in that context. And I immediately felt like drawn to the Pereira side. I was a Pereira through and through. Like I just knew that. I just knew it. Like I was the light-eyed child that popped up and was like a little different from everybody else. And again, I don't remember a lot of things from childhood, but these are the stories people tell about me, right? It was like you started talking when you were really young, and all of the things, and like there was something about you that it was always like this spirit, and I always knew that about myself. And so the when was I don't ever felt like I thought about how my actions would affect other people. I don't think about life like that. And I don't think that's selfish. I think that is actually one of the most giving things that you can do in life. Because when you think about this for a second, when you consider how your actions are going to affect someone else, and then you modify your actions in order to appease or to make someone else feel more comfortable, what you're actually doing is putting that person in debt to you.
Mm-hmm.
So now, not only are you diminishing yourself, that other person is not actually getting anything from that interaction because it has been warped in order to make them feel okay with whatever feelings they have about the situation, right? And I have found in my life that it's, empathy and non-selfishness is not that. It's actually being who you are to that person and saying, I'm sorry, like that sounds incredible for you, but I'm not actually interested in doing that. And then letting that person have the reaction they're going to have, right? And knowing that it's actually not about you. It's about them.
Yeah. Oh.
And then the follow-up is, I see that this is hard for you. You want to tell me about that? That's empathy. That is selflessness, is actually caring about the reaction that that person is having and wanting to know why. Why is my action making you feel this way? Right? And then that interaction is what makes us connect. If I just do the thing, we're not connecting at all. I go off and it sits there, right? Just like for you, it's going to sit there and you're like, I don't actually want to go to this. I don't actually want to go do this, but you do it anyway. And you do it 100 times. And 10 years later, you look at your partner and you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Right?
Resentment.
10 years have gone by and I've done nothing that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I don't even know who I am anymore. Right? It's like, no. And I've had this, last month, Patrick and I were doing something and I said to him, I was like, I was actually not very aware of this thing that we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And I said, do I really not consider other people's feelings when I make decisions? He's like, no, not at all. And I was like, oh, interesting. And I just left it at that. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And then I asked my best friend the same question. My best friend who I met in college, we were like 19 years old, and I saw her and I was like, "Hey girl, I have a question for you. Have I do I not consider other people's feelings when I with my actions?" And she's like, no." And then she said to me, she's like, at the beginning or like somewhere along the line of our friendship, I struggled with this deeply because it's hard because we go through life with people who are most of the time trying to make things okay, right? For everybody. And she's like, "You're not like that." And I struggled with that. And then I realized how incredible that is because she never has to think about in return how I am affected by her feeling, by her action. Because the gift of this is that other people's actions do not affect me at my core. They are their own. I can have feelings about them. I can be like, "Oh man, that sucks because I really wanted to share that experience with this person. But that's on me." Then I have to get past that and be like, "Well, if I'm not sharing this experience with this person, then I'm doing it myself." And what does that mean? Do you see
Oh
the difference
yeah.
between
Oh
that?
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love every bit of what you shared, Sue, because it's so relevant to me. And the last part in particular around you getting your response from your husband and you getting your response from your best friend, and them just knowing this. And then, but you also responding to that of like, okay, like,
Yeah.
this is who I am. I have had conversations with also, I have a couple very close friends, one of whom is actually my cousin. We grew up together. We're very, very close. I had like an intuitive reading done one time, and the psychic told me that we were like sisters in a past life or something. I don't know. So we have some deeper roots there, but we're very close. And I have heard both of their reactions too around my selfishness. Now, the difference with my reaction was that I did take it personally. And I mean, as I just shared and as I'm speaking now, it is something that I'm actively working through for sure in this season of my life. And I think the example with the volleyball that happened a couple weeks ago, I was met with some really bigger kind of like situations last year too with friends and family around that. It still deeply affects me. And as I say this, I recognize that this is still, I've come such a long way. Now my response to, or my relationship with no has so drastically improved. But I could still see, like, again, just recently, like how hard it was for me to just vocalize and speak like, no, I don't want to do this, and be so worried about the reaction on the other end. And I think to hear your reaction and your response to how you responded to your husband and your friend, to me feels again like this permission slip of like, it's fine. It's okay. And to the deeper thing is the reminder too that when we're not living in a place of true integrity, then that's only a disservice, not only for us, but the other person. And to your point too, like who knows how this could carry on and affect the relationship or the friendship or whatever, breed resentment or some animosity. And, it's not, again, I'm going through it, so it's not the easiest thing, but I can say how easier it has gotten the more that I practice it. And so I think it is a constant practicing of this, of recognizing and zooming out and just meeting yourself in this place and the other person. I think about the book too, the Four Agreements. I don't know if you've ever read it by Miguel Ruiz, I think he is. It's such a simple, short read, but he basically summarizes life into these like four agreements that you make with yourself. And the first one is never take anything personally, which means what people are thinking or saying or doing, like, it's not about you. And actually, as I say that, it's like, how selfish of us to always think that it's about us. Like, it's such a paradox.
Yes, it's not. Like the older I get, the more I realize nobody's thinking about me. They're just involved in their own lives. Like what I do, even my closest circle, like, you know what I mean? Like people think
Yeah.
about you when they're having a wonderful interaction with you, but then they go off and they're thinking about whatever, like whatever their lives are, whatever's going on in their lives. Again, children are wonderful at showing us this. No matter what I say, my daughter is like in her own world, thinking about her own things. She's not thinking about me at all, ever. And nor should she. Like, that is not her job. Like, I don't need you to think about me or what I'm feeling or what I'm going through. No. Like, you think about you follow your heart. She's in the process of figuring out what sparks joy and what, friendship, what is that, all of that stuff. It's like nobody's thinking about me. And isn't that freeing?
I was just
Like,
gonna say, how liberating.
it's liberating.
How liberating.
It's like they worry so much about like, oh, what do I look like on Instagram? It's literally like,
Yeah. Yep. 1 second swipe.
but the
Every
energy
time.
involved, the energy that we spend
Yeah.
thinking about that, like, why? You know what I'm saying? Like, for what? It's not important. It's not
Hmm.
important.
Yeah. You bring up your kids, and you mentioned something earlier around like the seeds that are planted in childhood. Uh, I don't know. I wonder about this of like, what are maybe the conditions or the circumstances or the things in someone's life, especially in childhood, that maybe predisposes them more to these seeds or prevents them. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, but it's like a question like, why is it that, like, you were using that example of meeting the students in architecture school and like that spark was there? It's like, why do some people have it? Or like, what is it about that it is? These are like existential questions.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
This is also like the nurture versus nature question. I think, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do
yeah.
have thoughts around that. And I think that, um, I can only reflect on my own childhood because I've
Mhm.
lived it. And with other people's stories, it's an interpretation, right? Like I'm interpreting what they're saying. But I think that when I reflect on my own childhood, the beauty of it was that, again, I had these two parents that came from very different types of families, and the stories talk about branding, right? It's like the brand of one family is very different than the brand of another family.
Mhm. Yep.
And when you enter the middle of that, and my brother and I are very similar in this way, he also does not think too much about what other people are going to think of him, or what, he doesn't couch his actions in other people's feelings about them. That's also more of a male thing, by the way. Women are trained to care what other people think about what we do. It is from the moment we are born. But I think that for me, the beauty in our heritage is that there is a deep rooted safety, security, never a moment of not feeling cared for by
Mm.
many people, generations, people I don't even know. When you come from a small town where you walk the streets and they're like, "Hi, Susie, és parecida com a tua avó." Like you look just like your grandmother. When those kinds of when your roots are so deep and so true, there's nothing that can shake that. I can call anyone right now. If I need something, I can call any one of my cousins. I can call my brother. I can call, whoever, and they will be there for me. And I know that. I know that. When you have that, you almost have permission to be free of that because it's always there, right? And some people take it differently. I think sometimes heritage can be a weight. It can feel like a burden. I did not have that experience. I think my parents always encouraged both of us to explore, to be. My father is a retired sea captain. I mean, that
Mhm.
man spent his entire life on the ocean, you know, traveling the world, just meditating on the sea. And there's something about that, that's also very, I don't know, it's like it's so inspiring, like to have somebody like that in your life who's not burdened by anything. He's not held down by anything. And then having my mother who took care of everything, hyper, like everything. She's so competent, Evelina, at everything that I knew that there was never going to be a moment where something wasn't taken care of. And then my father was the dreamer. And what that does is it just frees you to be a kid. And my brother and I were pretty much like left to our own devices. Like, my brother would like build go-karts and like send me down the street into trees. Like, that's what we were doing all day. He's like building slot machines from cardboard boxes and inviting me into that process. He's 5 years older than I am. He would be playing music and he's like, "Hey sis, come over here. Like, listen to this riff." And he's like, blah, 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 blah.
That's great.
I'm like 10. I'm like, yeah, he's 15, I'm 10. So it's like that kind of childhood where everything behind you is right there. It's like solid. You can just go. You can just go and explore. And nobody, my parents are not people who are like, take things personally. And who, my mother has expectations, right? She's like, you have to do things all the way. Like, you can't just half-ass this life. You know what I mean? She's like, you gotta do it. You gotta go for it. And then my dad's like, woo, let's just have fun and play some music and sing a song, right?
Great.
So all of that, I think it was like just a pot of that that allowed my brother and I to just truly explore who we were, even from a young age, without a lot of burden, not a lot of burden. We lived well. We spent summers in Portugal with grandparents and with my parents and with aunts and uncles and on the ocean and like going to the beach by ourselves and like whatever. We just kind of were doing the thing. So part of it is that freedom to just be yourself, but to know that the safety net is deep and rooted and not going anywhere anytime soon.
Thank you for sharing that, Sue. I never, as you were speaking, I was thinking about my own family because I never saw them in that light of like, they are my safety net. Like, I know that. I was having a conversation with my boyfriend the other day. We had dinner with my parents' house and it was lovely. My brother and his girlfriend were there and he doesn't have anyone here because he came from Bogota alone. He literally has no family here. He has like an aunt in California and friends. But he just reflected back to me. And in being with him, he has allowed me to love and appreciate my family more. Because from his perspective of having none of it here, he sees me and he's like, you literally have the dream family. He's like, I couldn't even like make up a better family with your sibling and all of your cousins. Cause I have like so many cousins my age and they're like I consider them my siblings. We all grew up together. We're all just like a year or two apart. And we're just the clan. We go out together. We do everything together. And it's been such an interesting journey of seeing that, like seeing a deeper appreciation for them. And it was on Monday. My boyfriend got a flat tire. And so I call my dad immediately. My dad drops everything, drives out, fixes his tire for him in the pouring rain. My boyfriend who grew up without a father. So like he reiterated that for me. And so I've always been aware of that. But I think something that's really landing for me, and it really landed as you were sharing your story, is not that maybe I take it for granted so much, but like I forget that at times. It isn't up until I'm reminded that I'm like, oh yeah, like they're always here. But I never considered the influence that could have had in my life in supporting who I am. And actually, I went to see my grandparents on a Wednesday, and it was one of those visits that, I don't know, 5 hours could have gone by, and we were just so dialed in and present because my grandma started going off about her upbringing, post-war and the poverty and like just And I'm like, tell me more. And then my grandpa's chiming in, sitting on his little chair, 90 years old. And my grandma's just going on and on and on about, oh, we didn't even have a clock when we were growing up. So we had to look across all the acres of our farmland to see if the neighbor had her lights on, because then we knew and like we needed to get up for work and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But something, I don't know how we got on this tangent, but she ended up sharing to me, reflecting to me of what a gift it was for me to go to Boston, to like leave home to go to school, to experience life in a completely different way. Because as you were talking too, I'm thinking like, well, why don't any of my other cousins kind of like have this spark? Like I think I might have shared with you, like, I love my brother so dearly and he has like all these things about him. And yet he's not as like, he doesn't like go after it as much. He's much more traditional than I am. And in talking with my grandma, I was like reflecting to her. I'm like, it is interesting because when I went to college, that was the first time I left home. All of us have always been in Connecticut. We all are friends with the same Polish people and friends and all that. And I go to college, and my first day, I meet my two best friends, Liz and Kate, and I'm talking Polish to my mom on the phone. And they're like, what language are you speaking? And I shared with my grandma, I'm like, that was the first moment that I got open to a different worldview. Because up until that point, I always have lived, I think, from the same perspective of like, this is how things are. This is how, you eat breakfast at a certain time because all of our family and friends eat breakfast. It's just like, there are these rituals and routines that you just don't think about because you just think they're normal and you think everyone else in the world lives this way. Mm-hmm. And then I meet Americans.
You're like, oh, wait.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going like with this, but only to say that there have been, in this reflection, I think I'm similar to you where we share this, our heritage of having that support. But I think maybe also the curiosity that led us to go outside of our norms or like comforts in life. Because I think that has so much to play into it. It's like the trip that you take that completely just like cracks your eyes wide open of like, oh my God, this is a completely different way of life and all that. So yeah, I don't know, maybe a question that I want to ask you that, because I know that you've traveled so much and you're also very open and receptive with your curious energy to also take in the world in that way. Do you have any moments maybe in your life that have really impacted your worldview? Maybe a trip that you've taken or something like that, or an experience?
Well, similar to you, the college experience was life changing. But I want to go back to the idea of nature versus nurture, because I do think that there are some of us where that feels natural to us, right? So we are lucky, you and I, that we had both the stability and we have the spark to want to explore. And that does not fulfill everybody. I don't think this is sort of a universal thing. I'm not saying like, oh, everyone should be like this.
Yeah.
I think it's certain people do have that, and others have other things that are important to them. And I think, like you talk about your brother, like my brother still lives 5 minutes from my parents. My brother has a similar spirit, but he has never had the desire to leave and to go and to explore. He lived at home until he got married at the age of like 30, like that's very common, right? So I do think it's a combination of nurture and nature, right? That there's some of us that need that, and some of us actually go for it, right? Because we have the support in order to do it, and others are not able to, right? So they shrink back and they feel like they haven't lived life, right? But not everybody needs that. Other people have other kind of deep rooted needs, right? That they need to explore. I think the hard thing is kind of, not all the pieces are going to come together perfectly for everyone and what they're like, what kind of spirit they have, because you
Yeah.
meet people and you kind of get a sense of them right away, right? Like you say, you and I are very similar. We have similar backgrounds, but we also have kind of like a similar spirit for life. We're both Leos. I don't know about the astrology thing, but there's something to
I think there's probably something there.
that, right? Like whatever. So yes, and then the nurture part is not just childhood, it's everything that follows that, right? So
Yeah.
for us, the experience of an architecture school education is like no other. And again, I haven't been through others, but I've talked to a lot of people who do other things. None of it sounds like that, right?
Yep.
um so that was life changing. That was the same for me. I'm like, I am going to go to Boston to school, and this is going to be a thing. Like I didn't even, it wasn't even a question. Like I will go and study in Boston somewhere. I always knew that I wanted to do that, and I always knew that that was the way to expand myself, was because I wanted to come in contact with other people that weren't my Portuguese friends that came from Portugal at the same time my parents did. It was just like you. It was like everybody was Portuguese. They even created a school for us. There were that many immigrant children.
Oh,
Like we would go
wow.
to Portuguese school on Wednesday night for 4 hours.
I had Polish school on Saturday mornings.
Same, right? It's the same thing. There were that many
Yeah.
of them that they made a school. Like,
It's wild.
so yeah, that, I think that desire to like explore is not in everybody, and that's fine, right? That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of my brother and I'm thinking of my friends and different family members who are quite opposite to me. And actually, in that realm, what a gift, because they are reminders for me in moments where things that I can't see for myself. Because I think in asking the question around like the spark and all that, I recognize how much, because I am that way, it's almost like I think everyone is, or I feel like everyone should be that way. It's like we're so in our echo chambers. I'm like, well, this is my worldview, and so everyone needs to be like this. But I'm like, hold on a second. To what you're sharing, like, we're all created so uniquely different, I believe, for a deeper purpose, to whether it's like a reminder or using someone as like in my little mentorship group, we use the word mirror, of like everyone's always a reflection of you, things that you can't see for yourself, which I think is so powerful. And since I kind of like have been thinking about that concept, I don't know, anytime I have like a triggering conversation with my boyfriend or whatever, I'm like, fuck, like what is this saying about me? It's just been interesting to kind of think about it through that lens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just, yeah, I don't know. Appreciate your responses, because it's allowed me to kind of look at my own life and see it through a deeper
Yeah.
lens.
You know,
Yeah.
Anais Nin has a quote that I love. She's an amazing writer. If you haven't read any of her work, you should.
Mm-mm. What's her name?
Anais Nin,
Anais Nin.
Nin. Yeah. She has a quote that says, "We don't see the world as it is; we see the world as we are." And it is
Mm.
this beautiful quote that reminds us that, the lens, there is no such thing as the world. It's not an absolute, right? It is always seen through the lens of the person living it. And that is so, it's powerful, because it reminds you, whenever you come in contact with somebody else, that they're seeing the world through their own lens, which is not yours. And so a lot of times we come kind of into conflict because we expect other people to understand the world through our lens, and they never will.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It's impossible. So when you talk about mirrors, it's those moments where you're like, oh, in this instance, this person, I'm seeing myself in this person, right? But it is just an instant. It's a moment. It's like, ah, and then it passes, right? And you're back again to kind of seeing the world through your own eyes. And it's a very powerful way to reconnect to that idea of not trying to mold your choices to other people's needs. Because first of all, don't presume you understand what they are. And second of all, that's not helping anybody. That's not doing anything for anybody, right? It's like, what is that doing? It's just creating a world of like passing by, right? We're just passing by each other. So yeah, I don't know. That quote has been with me for years. I remember starting to read her work when I was in my 20s, probably.
I'll have to
And
look her up.
it's very, it's from a female perspective. Again, I think there's a lot of that I explore personally, of how we're expected to live in the world versus how men are expected to be in the world, and what that means. I don't think that we would be having this conversation if I were a man right now, about what it means to consider other people's feelings before you make a decision. I honestly do not think that men think about those things.
Yeah, I mean, my boyfriend is definitely a big like inspiration for me in this regard of how he never takes anything personally.
Yeah.
Ever. He has the thickest skin. I mean, he's had a very different upbringing and life circumstances, but when I am worked up over the smallest things, it's just like he's my reminder that it's either not that serious, or to zoom out, or to think about it another way, or yeah. But it is so interesting of how different we are in that regard. And I think to what you're sharing of, I could look to my brother and my male cousins too, that like myself and my female cousins, like we carry very different worries when it comes to life, pleasing people, the question of the selfishness again.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah. Well, Sue, I want to maybe close by asking you a question on like what's next? Like what's next for Susana Goss? Studio or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's less thinking, less trying, and more doing. I want to be in my life again. And what that means is, when I'm designing, creating, imagining, connecting with people, that's what's important. And that more of that. Like, I want to do less work, but do more of it myself, and connect with people more deeply and take longer. Everyone's like, oh, you got to be efficient at your projects. I was like, do I? Is that really the point? Efficiency? No. Like, yes, just be in my work, is an extension of myself. It's like, and whatever that means, I think it's simplification. It's returning to the root of what I love about relationships, which is the freedom for each of us to be ourselves and to rely on each other without burden, right? With just support and love and encouragement and care and like, yes, like let's go, instead of like, oh, this feels heavy. So more of that. It's just stripping away the stuff that really doesn't matter that much. So yeah, so there, and how the world is going to see this is, I think, in the same way that you have been seeing it, but more of it. Less, it's going to be less polished, because I think there was like a little bit of like, oh, it needs to be polished and look like this, when actually it doesn't. People love the posts that I put up about like cooking on the fire. Those are like
yes. I was telling you yesterday. Yeah. So good.
Oh, that, like, I cook. I started like I love cooking on an open fire, and I do it a lot. I'm like, we're doing this more, like more. Like I did that 4 nights in a row
It
cooking on
tastes
an
so
open fire.
different. Oh,
That wasn't something I did for Instagram. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like I cook on an open fire, and I was like, babe, we used to cook on the big one down below, and now we cook on a little one up above because it's a little bit easier. And I got a grate, and it's like all the things, and I love it. Right? It's like the fire needs to be made 4 hours ahead of time of when you're actually going to cook it. So, like, that kind of stuff is what I want to return to. Just, life is not about being polished. It's just about being, it's just life. It's like, I don't know, like, yeah,
Mm,
more of that. So, Susanna
yeah.
Goss is going to have all the things, going to have architecture and interiors and, art and cooking and, whatever, whatever it is, that I'm doing on that particular week.
Oh,
That's what
the ultimate reminder. Thank you so, so much, Sue. Like, I'm taking, I mean, all of this conversation, but especially this last piece, definitely to heart. Because I really feel like I'm in a very similar place of looking back to all the things of Evelina uh, outside of just the branding and coming back to them, embracing them all. And it feels really, really good. And I'm very excited for you and your whatever this being journey now is going to unfold. And yeah, just so very grateful to you for you. The conversation we had yesterday, that was like so perfectly timed in the midst of a morning where I was like feeling those questions of like, what's the point of this all? Like, what am I doing here? And then you texted me and we got on the call. I'm like, okay, I feel better now. And yeah, just this recording today, which clearly was meant to happen outside of, our first go around. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you always. Our conversations have been instrumental in these last few years. I adore you and everything that you're doing. So keep doing everything.
Thank you, Sue. Last thing, can you just share with people where they can find you if they're
Oh,
curious? If you've planted some seeds in this dialogue.
yes. Well, it will all be shifting. So eventually, when this comes out, it will be susanagoss.studio. Um, that's where you can find me, and Instagram will follow suit. So it'll be susanagoss.studio at Instagram. That's where you can find me.
Thank you, Sue.